Hey everyone, we're back to tear down the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2. This cooler has done the best in our testing so far for the new testing, and it's among the best performers in our old test suite. So we've requested a second one so that we didn't take apart our sample that we spent a week of testing time on. I ran this one through the test as well, just to have another set of data. And today we're going to take apart the pump and see if there's anything else to the assembly of this that makes it perform as well as it did, aside from the fact that it's got a thicker radiator and then just fans that are built well. So let's get to it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Gigabyte Aorus RTX 2080 Ti Extreme. The RTX 2080 Ti Extreme is built with a triple axial cooling solution and ready for anyone interested in intermediate GPU overclocking, although it's also up for gaming out of the box. The Gigabyte 2080 Ti can reach the higher performance range required to play games at frame rates at and beyond 144 FPS, coupled particularly well with games like Call of Duty Warzone, Rainbow Six Siege, and other competitive FPSs. Gigabyte's Extreme is built to be a looker for system builders going for extra visual flair. Learn more at the link in the description below. So first of all, let's just point this out. Radiator is thicker. This is not actually the radiator size. So this is about 39 millimeters for the frame of the radiator. Radiator itself is, let's see, we have to subtract about 6 millimeters or so, presumably from either side of the frame. Radiator is gonna end up being about 28 millimeters or so thick for just the rad, not counting the frame. So it is wider. That might interfere with some cases that you're really on the edge of it working, but you'll just have to check on a case-by-case basis, literally, to see how that works out. Let's get to the thing that we actually care about here. So first of all, this is what we were talking about in the review when saying that the pump fan is connected. Oh, that's interesting. So here's the original review unit, which we got back when these launched. So I don't know if that was September to November area, 2019. This is what I was working with for the review. The reason I said interesting is because this is the cable for the VRM fan, which is up here. That's the VRM fan. And this cable is what I was able to really easily just disconnect for A/B testing in our review. So you unplug it and the fan stops spinning, easy enough. And to do it without remounting, I basically stuck a rod through here from the side and then just applied pressure on both sides of it, sort of downward like that to get it disconnected without dismounting it. So that's how it's hooked up here. And I noticed when I redid the testing on this new one, I noticed that the pump was no longer reporting a speed in BIOS. And I'm not sure, was never quite 100% clear if the reported speed for the original unit was actually the pump or if it was the VRM fan. But either way, it was a number that was there. And with this unit, the new one, I only have the fan speeds. I don't have, when I plug the pump header in here, I don't have a pump speed. It just reads 0, even though it is definitely moving. So I'm wondering if that's related to this. If you look closely here, you'll see that it's no longer a cable that just connects in via a header. It's actually a cable that is soldered into the PCB underneath. So that's a very different approach to connecting it than what we reviewed. It doesn't really influence the product now, but much different way of connecting it. Because in almost every instance, you're not going to be unplugging this cable anyway. So getting this one versus the old one shouldn't matter to a real user, just for someone testing. That said, it looks like you've still got this, and this would, to their credit, be much easier to work with for A/B testing than the other one, because I could actually get it out of the body enough to unplug it without having to use tools. So anyway, that's the difference on the bottom. Not a big deal, but it is different. Let's just validate that the cold plate is the same size and make sure they didn't change anything else that I need to know about. About 44. So about 44 by 40. 40 is gonna be from what I'm calling the front and the back of the cooler. That's still 40. And that is still 44. So the cold plate hasn't changed. Just making sure there are no major important changes. I guess this is new too. They've labeled the pump on the bottom. It's 12 volt, 0.49 amps. I think that's about all we've got for major external changes. So let's start taking apart the new one, which has fans on it. We get this one out of the shot. And for this teardown today, we're gonna be working on the GN medium mod mat, which is in stock and on the store. We've arranged for the large ones, which is under this down here. Yours will not come with all of the thermal paste and year of copper powder and aluminum powder on it. It'll come clean, but the mediums are on the store and the large ones are on their way in. So we'll have those in soon if you want to back order them, but otherwise mediums ready to go. Okay, so we've got 4 screws here, and they're just Phillips. Looks like maybe Phillips 2 or 1. I'll grab one of our screwdrivers while I'm promoting things. And let me just check the exact sizing. That's going to be a Phillips 2. A 1 will fit, but I think that's it. That's going to maybe be the easiest teardown we've done for a cooler. Definitely torqued pretty hard, but not nearly as hard as Asetek's. In theory, if we can disassemble this non-destructively, I should be able to refill it and reuse it. We wouldn't be able to use it exactly the same way for thermal testing because it would have been modified, but we could at least use it maybe for a bench, like a GPU test bench. So we're starting to get a leak now, which is expected. Sometimes people ask why we take these apart. Well, it's to understand how they work, obviously. So this isn't just to destroy it, and in most instances it is not destroyed, but we'll see about this. A lot of the liquid coolers we disassemble have wires soldered in for RGB LEDs that have, oh weird, those are 2 different sizes, that have to be clipped, but this doesn't have RGB LEDs. Okay, so is it the top 2? Okay then. So the top 2 screws specifically, when I say top, I mean towards the VRM fan. Those are longer. All right, there's the plate, there's the micro fins. And let me drain this. Easiest to drain I've ever worked with. Normally you have to slosh these around a lot. So typically coolers are filled with a propylene glycol, and I can smell it. It's got a very distinct smell. And propylene glycol is a mixture with the distilled water that allows them to do a lot of things like mix metals. Closed loop liquid coolers, for the most part, can mix metals with almost zero issue if it's done properly. Asetek, Coolant, both those companies tend to do it properly. Enermax does not. And it also allows different amounts of cold tolerance. If you have a customer as the CLC maker, you have a customer who says, we are selling these to, we're selling units for government research to a cold environment. Maybe it's in Scandinavia, maybe it's in the Arctic, whatever. And they can change the amount of propylene glycol in there to be more tolerant for, say, minus 40 degrees Celsius is a common one that some of the Asetek units are targeted for. So that's all that does. But the more glycol mixture you have in there, the lower the cooling capabilities. So it's not desirable for cooling performance. Okay, so just for sake of reference, it's got about, let's call that about, it's hard to tell with the bubbles on top, but it looks like about 250 to 270 milliliters of liquid. A lot of the CLCs we empty tend to be in the 100 to 200 range. 280s tend to be about 200. So this is a fatter radiator, and that shows since more water came out. You've also got to account for the tube length and things like that. Point of reference, here's NZXT's brand new X63. It uses a Gen 7 Asetek pump, which is pretty similar in a lot of ways to Gen 6. And we're going to be comparing some bits and pieces of this as we go. The Arctic solution outperformed NZXT's, which is going to be 1 part fans, 1 part radiator size, and then 1 part pump. So in terms of micro fins, orient them the same way. If we get a tight zoom on definitely the Arctic one, you'll see how densely packed they are. I need to check with Arctic on the exact fin density. Fin pitch is mostly going to be 90 degrees on pretty much every CLC. Some of them do a special fin pitch though, depending on the product. And you'll typically find micro fins on a closed loop cooling part like this, as opposed to the larger fins that are in open loop parts. A lot of that is to do with cost. These are made by Skiving, And we can hopefully have the editors drop in some footage of a skiving machine from our Cooler Master factory tour last year, so you can see how that's made. If you're curious to learn more about that, you can watch our factory tour video, and that'll tell you how these are made. So that would be in our How Liquid Coolers Are Made video. Micro fins about 22.3 millimeters by about 30.5. 22.3 by 30, and about 30 by 24. So they are almost identical. Asetek's got a bit more surface area there, at least assuming the fin density is the same, but I would wager that Asetek might have a denser, it looks like their fin density is going to be higher. Oh yeah, I think that is accurate. Yeah, Asetek's fin density is higher. So Asetek has more surface area, but is not performing better. However, the radiator size is quite different. I'll measure that. There's another key difference in these two. I made the comment about the screw lengths and about the torque. So Asetek's torqued, they torqued the hell out of theirs. Their screw types have changed over the years, but Asetek has traditionally used extremely small Allen or Torx, and they apply so much torque to those screws by machine, that, or at least machine screwdriver, that it's almost impossible to get it out without stripping one of them in the process. We've gotten good at it, but it was not without some failures where I had to drill them out. So Asetek uses 2, 4, 6, 8 to secure its cold plate. Arctic's using 4. That doesn't mean either superior than the other, but it is a noteworthy difference. And Asetek's plate is much larger overall. I'm not going to do a pi r squared calculation today, but it's a larger cold plate, obviously, because it covers the entire area of the other one and exceeds it. But the Intel bench has a much larger HEDT CPU, and those Intel HEDT IHSs work really well with the Asetek plates. So Asetek tuned its design for Intel HEDT back when that was king, and not much has changed for their designs generationally. Arctic really was hitting the Ryzen market. So they launched kind of later. They launched in the stride of AMD Ryzen. It was after Intel had started to slip, and that's the difference you see in the cold plate design. Just for sake of having it, let's get a measurement of this as well. So including the chassis, that's going to measure 30 mil instead of 38. That is 7.2 mil. Make sure roughly the same. It's about average. They're about 7 millimeters on each side. So we've got 14 that we can cut off of 30. So we're down to 16 millimeters for the actual tank, the radiator itself. Actually, the tank, I shouldn't really say that. The tank, if you want to get technical, this is the tank. And on the other end, this is the tank. You don't have a reservoir with the CLC, so that's why you mount with the tubes at the bottom, so that any air bubbles that form are not where the tubes are, because if they, over time, as you have extreme permeation and you start to lose liquid into these tubes, then your water level will get lower. So if you do your radiator vertically with the tubes at the top, what happens is, first of all, they don't ship completely full. It's not possible. With permeation over time, the water level is going to drop. Once it drops to the point where some of the air, which will be at the top point in the loop, once some of the air is exposed to the barb, it'll get sucked down through the pump, and that's the whining noise a lot of people complain about with their CLCs. Typically, they don't really whine all that much unless it's a bad design. Most of them are just sucking air through the pump from people setting it up like this, which is wrong. So public service announcement, don't do that. Try to get the tubes like this. Or you could also do like this. Either way is, God, there was water in the loop. Either way is gonna get the, either way is gonna get the air away from going into the pump. Let me mop this up. Apparently we didn't get it all out a couple weeks ago when we did this one. I don't think these are threaded. I wanted to expose the tubes without destroying the sleeving, but we'll take it apart more and see if that becomes easy. The reason I say that is because the tube, so Asetek over here uses a rubberized tube, whereas Cooler Master uses a Teflon-lined tube. The rubberized tubes are less permeation resistant than the Teflon-lined tubes. They're still good. They'll last you like, well, warranty's 6 years these days. Realistically, you're talking like 6 to 8 maybe. And the rubber is just more flexible. Problem with Teflon is if you bend it like this, you'll crack the Teflon, and now permeation is going to be really bad. So anyway, a side note for you. And I guess I'll note this, if you like this type of technical information and learning about the stuff that you use, then grabbing something like one of our mod mats from store.gamersnexus.net is a great way to support us. They're really high quality for PC builds, disassembly, things like that, and they also have a grounding cable. They are anti-static conductive, and we've tested that. Okay, let's pull out the gasket. So there's our gasket, standard rubber gasket, except sized for the new cold plate. So that's gonna socket that into there. So there's your flow guidance. Helps with maintaining a certain pressure too, whatever they spec. So we've got the different channels in here. I'm not sure which is in and out. I'm gonna take an informed guess and say that I think the bottom center, or sorry, the bottom down there in the middle is probably in. And I'm assuming that's gonna be our out, but I'm not positive. Let's see if we can get a little further inside of this. Let me disconnect this, just so it doesn't get ripped out of the solder joint. And we've got Phillips 2, Phillips 2, Phillips 1, Phillips 1, Phillips 1, Phillips 2, Phillips 2, Phillips 1. There's a lot of screws for this. Haven't taken one of these apart before, so we are learning at the same time. I'm not sure which screws are required to get which piece of the assembly off, but we're just taking the whole thing apart, so it doesn't matter. So it's in between those two. Just tracking this that way. If we decide to reassemble this and use it later, we've got it written down. Theoretically, you could go through the first step of this process to refill the loop. If it ends up drying out, you would just hold it upside down, keep this part high, pull the 4 screws out, remove the plate, and try to move it around, get all the liquid as far down as you can, and then you could refill it. That would be how you would maintain it if you wanted to keep it in operation if there's some permeation with age. So these are maybe captive. Oh, I see. Oh, no, they're not captive. We just need to push down to pull on them a little bit. Okay, cool. And that goes up here in the front. Okay, so shell is separated. That's just going to be the fan. It's completely separate from the rest. And then pump's going to be in there, so that's where we want to get into. Looks like once we pull the fan assembly off, there's going to be a screw hiding somewhere. Okay, well, there's the back cover to the pump. QC marks. 2020. Okay, so we've got a foam block here. Presumably that's just for spacing, but it could also be for vibration, so that there's not like a rattling noise of this plastic shell. Typically these are used for damping vibration. The cables are all soldered in, so this is not something you're going to want to break unless you can resolder them, which isn't that hard, but that's going to be the cable for, where is it? Over here, this one I think right there. So I think that's going to be our fan. It's a 4-pin, and that's going to be our pump header on this side over here, and then that's our VRM fan. What is this? That's a gummed up hole. So I don't know if that's maybe a fill port that they jammed with rubber after. Okay. There's the interesting part. That looks like the old Dynatron impellers, the ones that they sourced back from the Asetek cooler series, which were crazy good for how much they sucked in every other way. The Asetek cooler 1250. All right, so let's pull this out. Okay. All right, here's our impeller. And then there's the motor. Tell you what, the coils, the copper wraps, wire wraps look really high quality. Sometimes we see these where there's like some copper fraying, or you'll have it a lot looser wound than this. So the copper winding's really job well done there. It looks clean, good quality wrap and copper. So that's going to be our electromagnet and PCB with all the wiring. Nothing special is needed like with NZXT where you have all this mess for RGB LEDs. So it's a lot simpler than that, which drives down the cost significantly. Now you're making one less board. So looking at the housing here, there's a rubber gasket on the outside. Rubber gasket is for preventing leaks. Scratch away at this thing that I thought was filled rubber for fill port. I think there's actually a screw in there. The reason I say that is because on the other side I can see some thread sticking through. Oh, yep. There's a screw. So that might be the fill port. Uh-oh, that screwdriver has a Corsair logo on it. That's the best thing they made with the A500. Yeah, I'm thinking that's the fill port. There's the impeller. Pretty good quality impeller. It's significantly better than what Asetek. I was just checking if it's plastic or if it is metal, but it is in fact metal. Better than what Asetek used to do, the old yellow ones. We have footage of that from our EVGA CLC teardown that we can drop into this video, but a lot better than those. Asetek these days is doing this. So, I mean, I wish I could offer more insight specifically to impeller design, but I would need to speak to an impeller designer to learn about that. And the people who make these coolers, they're not designing the impellers, they're buying this from someone. So they're not the right people to ask. We would have to go to their supplier. But perhaps in our next trip to China, when we can travel again, that would be something we could look into. But anyway, big difference in the impeller design. And presumably the rate of flow, the flow rate might be better on the Arctic cooler, but that's something we would have to test as well with a flow meter, and we're not set up for that right now. So that's what it looks like inside. Top chamber is not really nothing special to see here. This side, if you're curious, is just plastic molding, so nothing special there either. That's just the top of it. I think one important piece of insight I can provide here, if you're wondering about the look of this, and not just the look, but the interior, the structure of it, one of the biggest challenges in liquid coolers right now is Asetek's patent. Asetek has successfully enforced its patent in the United States. And if I remember correctly, maybe in Europe, and last time I looked into it, they were working on getting one in China. So Asetek's patent is more or less, the pump is on the CPU, it's in the block. The way that companies get around this is they do stuff like what Deepcool does with the Captain series, where they have this tube coming out of the lower section, going up and going back in. And that bypasses the patent because now your pump is technically in a different chamber. It's not in the same chamber as the cold plate, and there's more nuance to it than that. But that's why you see some designs where we'll do a video like bypassing Asetek's patent. And it's not because we think they deserve or don't deserve the patent. It's because it's literally how you bypass it, and whether or not you think their patent is valid, the companies that are selling in the US, if they don't want to be sued, still have to work around it. So likely Arctic had to put some thought into how they were going to deal with Asetek and not getting sued. So that's probably part of the reason you see the design you do. So that's it for the teardown. The big differences or takeaways here are going to be the impeller size and design. Again, not an impeller expert, but you're talking plastic, smaller impeller versus the larger metal one. What that means, well, we'd have to either do some kind of special flow testing or talk to the engineers of the impellers. And then the electromagnet has really high quality work on it. The windings are good, and the radiator size impacted the performance almost certainly. That's why it takes longer to heat up. And then we've got a couple of other key takeaways. The fans were obviously the other major point for performance. So yeah, that's gonna be it for the teardown. It looks like the shipping units now versus the early review samples, which should have been retail units but might have changed in the months since, they're a bit different in how the fan's connected on the bottom. It looks like it's a better, easier design to work with, or at least one that the user can interface with a little bit easier. There's an extra point of failure in the solder joint, but it's unlikely that fails unless you really like yank it out of there, and at that point you'd have to solder it back in. But otherwise, that's the Arctic cooler. Hopefully that sheds some light on how they design it. If you want to see other teardowns in this series, we recently did the Kraken X63, and in that video we have comparisons to the previous Asetek coolers and some others that we've taken apart over the years. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. As always, go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus, and we'll see you all next time.